one of the biggest questions of life, and also famously asked by Gottfried Leibniz. He asked this: why do we experience something rather than nothing? We're going to talk about that today. In the last 100 years, science has made gigantic leaps forward. For the longest time, for hundreds of years prior to around Einstein, modern science believed that the universe was stagnant, that it was eternal, that it was unchanging, that it was just here, that there was no beginning to the universe. But only in the last about 100 years, there have been a lot of discoveries that have disproved that theory. Now modern science believes that the universe began to exist. As you can imagine, this evidence has made the case for God's existence very strong, and it's starting to make a lot of scientists be a little bit uncomfortable with the implications of what is going on. Time, space, and matter all had their origin at a singular place. There was a time where there was no yesterday. Everything came into being from that one time. Now, there are some atheists that don't like these implications, and they try to get around the whole idea of it beginning to exist from nothing. So the important question is, why do we experience this? Where did it all come from? Why do we have this beautiful world and mind that we get to enjoy, and all the other benefits of life? Lawrence Krauss, who's a very famous atheist, had a lot to say on this matter, and I think you're going to find it amusing. Let's watch.
What came before the Big Bang?
The philosophers in ancient times used to say, how could something arise from nothing? And what's amazing to me is that the laws of physics allow that to happen. And it means that our whole universe, everything we see, everything that matters to us today, could have arisen out of precisely nothing.
So he's saying that the universe began to exist. But you see what he's saying? He's saying that nothing caused something. Let's watch the next interview, and he kind of expands on this idea of nothing giving birth to something.
Is this remarkable fact that nothing is unstable, that empty space is unstable. The laws of quantum mechanics, combined with gravity, will tell you that if you have empty space there, and you wait long enough, particles will be created. And if you wait long enough, empty space will always produce a universe full of matter.
Remember, if the current models of the universe given to us from science is correct, time, space, and matter all began to exist. Lawrence Krauss keeps talking about nothing being unstable, and if there is space, that nothing will act upon it. But there was no space before the universe began to exist. There is no space, there is no gravity, there are no laws of nature, because remember, nature, the laws of nature require a universe to act on. Let's go to another clip where Richard Dawkins buries himself trying to describe what nothing really is.
Question. Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century was asking this same question. He said there must have been a time when no physical things existed, but something can't come from nothing. That was his view. It's just been repeated by us.
Something can come from nothing, and that's what physicists are now telling us. I could give you, you asked me to give you a layman's interpretation. It would be a very, very layman's interpretation. When you have matter and antimatter and you put them together, they cancel each other out and give rise to nothing. What Lawrence Krauss is now suggesting is that if you start with nothing, the process can go into reverse and produce matter and antimatter. The theory is still being worked out. It's a very difficult theory, mathematical theory. I'm not qualified to answer.
But the trouble, well, there are many troubles with Richard's teachings, but a fundamental one is that he dumbs down God and he soups up nothing. He continually talks as though God is some sort of upmarket figure within space and time. Now, from 450, 500 BC, where with the Greek philosophers, God is outside space and time. God is necessary, self-sufficient, uncaused, unconditioned. What Richard is describing as nothing is a sort of a mixture of particles and perhaps a vacuum with electromagnetic forces working on it. That's what Krauss is talking about under the heading of nothing.
It's
you
a matter,
can quickly respond to that before the
you
next
can
question.
dispute exactly what's meant by nothing, but whatever it is, it's very, very simple. And why is that funny?
Well, I think it's a bit funny to be trying to define nothing.
I like the line from the musical Sound of Music. It says that nothing comes from nothing because nothing ever could. That's really the essence of the argument against what they're saying. You can't ever get something from nothing. Nothing never gives birth to something. And we can just go around and around in circles. I like how Aristotle defined nothing. He said, nothing is that which rocks dream about. So you may be wondering, then why talk in absurdities? Why are these very, very intelligent people talking about things that just make no sense whatsoever? Well, I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to get around the fact that the universe seems to be caused. The universe began to exist, and we know that everything that begins to exist has a cause. The only thing that hasn't ever begun to exist, as we talked about in a past video, the only thing that hasn't begun to exist is God. But really everything else in the universe that we know of that begins to exist has a cause for its existence. I'm going to formulate an argument. This is a formal argument that you can use that's really powerful in showing that God exists or a cause of the universe exists. Remember that if the form is valid and the premises are true, then the argument is sound, which means that the conclusion necessarily follows, that it must be true. The first premise is everything that begins to exist has a cause. Premise number two is the universe began to exist. And then number three, therefore the universe has a cause. This is called the cosmological argument, or the cosmological argument. And it's very powerful. Now, we're only really looking at the first premise, that everything that begins to exist has a cause. Most of science agrees that the universe began to exist. A lot of these atheistic scientists are trying to get around the first premise, that everything that begins to exist has a cause. And they're trying to say, well, the universe didn't need a cause. It just popped into existence. I'd love to challenge you to think of anything that began to exist that didn't have a cause for its existence. This is a foundational scientific principle. Science really is just a search for causes. So even though the first principle is fairly obvious, there are a lot of philosophers who kind of make the argument that, well, I can imagine things popping into existence. I can imagine great cups of coffee popping into existence. I can imagine stacks of books popping into existence. I can also imagine stuffed animals just popping into existence. You see, that kind of stuff just doesn't happen. And here's my coffee. Gotta bring it in somewhere. Of course, I'm sure you probably are aware that just because I can imagine something doesn't mean that something actually like that happens. If things like stacks of books and coffee cups don't pop into existence, why should we believe that universes do? Especially highly ordered universes like ours just pop into existence out of nothing. If things don't just pop into existence all the time for you either, maybe you should give consideration to why our universe is here, why we are here. Why do we experience something and nothing? So this was just the first part of the cosmological argument. We'll get into the second part, that the universe began to exist, and look at the scientific grounding and reasons for why they believe that is. I hope this has been helpful and fun. Please let me know in the comments below. And I'd love to hear what you guys think of the cosmological argument. So God bless. Hope your day is going well.